The total retreat. Nearly 60% of Taiwanese businessmen consider leaving China. In 2024, many companies from Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, the US, and Europe are accelerating the process of withdrawing production lines and assets from China. The departure of well-known companies and brands is creating a massive wave, which has been accelerating in the final months of the year. With the release of a series of heavyweight economic policies by the Chinese Communist Party, the A-share market rebounded strongly before the founding anniversary of the People's Republic of China on October 1st. However, the CCP's harsh intervention in the stock market has caused foreign businesses operating in China to feel insecure and at risk. American think tank experts pointed out that 57.4% of Taiwanese companies are considering leaving mainland China. In response, the Epoch Times interviewed two Taiwanese businessmen and a cross-strait economic and trade expert to analyze the mental journey of Taiwanese businessmen who had to choose to leave due to labor costs, supply chain disruptions, and changing policies after more than 30 years of reform and opening up in China. Many people have entered the market as the Chinese stock market has risen for several days under the stimulus of a series of measures taken by the Beijing authorities. However, Reuters pointed out that it is too early for foreign capital to return to China because few fund managers expect the Chinese economy to grow vigorously in the short term. But institutional investors, who manage more than $1.5 trillion in client funds, said that the measures taken by the Chinese Communist Party to attract more funds into the stock market and stimulate consumer spending have increased the attractiveness of Chinese companies, which are still undervalued. In September, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, a U.S. think tank, published an expert study titled Diversification Rather Than Decoupling. Taiwan's industry responds to geostrategic risks. The results obtained after visiting 610 Taiwanese companies at the end of 2023 indicated that 57.4% of Taiwanese companies are considering leaving mainland China. If your competitors go, you have to go, Liao Jinjiang, a Taiwanese businessman who had run a business in mainland China for more than 20 years and withdrew from China in 2022, told the Epoch Times that in the 1980s, China suddenly opened up and was willing to let you set up factories. When your competitors go, you have to go. Because your competitors go to the mainland, their quotas are lower than yours, so you can't not go. You are completely forced to go. At that time, Taiwan was still in the era of killing Jew and pulling out Mao, the slogan of the anti-bandit and anti-insurgency movement. Zhu refers to Zhu Dai, and Mao refers to Mao Zedong. So how did they suddenly start running away one by one? Liao Jinjiang said that he felt as if there was a force behind him pushing him. Li Mengju, who was once the general manager of a technology company, also said, "The first batch went mainly for cost considerations, and the second batch went because if you don't go, you will lose your competitiveness." Li Mengju, from the electronics industry, said that almost all of Taiwan's previous generations of electronics manufacturers have withdrawn, mainly because U.S. President Trump launched a trade war in 2018. In recent years, due to Xi Jinping's strict suppression of freedom of speech, there was the so-called 709 human rights lawyers mass arrest incident, and local media in mainland China disclosed that Guangdong province arrested tens of thousands of people in 1 year. So Taiwanese businessmen heard some cases around them, including that some people in the Taiwanese business circle have been cut off, exploited. Li Mengju said, Taiwanese businessmen are basically very sensitive overseas. Once they hear that the news is wrong, they will slowly withdraw. Labor costs, supply chain disruptions, and changing policies force Taiwanese businessmen to leave. According to a survey by a U.S. think tank, the top 3 reasons for Taiwanese businessmen withdrawing from China are labor, salary costs being too high, 33%, the possibility of supply chain disruptions, 25.9%, and changes in investment policies, 25.2%. Compared with the previous year, the risk of war between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait has subsided, now ranking fourth, 24.1%. Regarding labor, salary costs, which account for the largest proportion, Liao Jinzhang recalled that when he first entered the mainland in 1995, the basic salary of an ordinary worker was only about 200 yuan per month, and working overtime every day to earn 300 or 400 yuan a month was considered a lot. At that time, the monthly salary in the mainland was only 80 yuan. He said this is why people desperately moved from the inland to the coast to work. When I left 2 years ago, an ordinary worker's salary was about 5,000 yuan, so in more than 20 years, wages have increased by about 25 times. However, it is regrettable that many workers still cannot support their families. Why? Because all the money they earned was eaten up by Xi Jinping's inflation. Officials from Taiwan's Ministry of Economic Affairs also pointed out that after the outbreak of the U.S.-China trade war, the supply chain shifted and Taiwanese factories moved to new southbound countries to set up plants or moved production capacity back to Taiwan. In the past, products were exported from China to the United States. Now that production capacity in Taiwan has increased, direct exports to the United States are also growing. The Wall Street Journal reported on October 2nd that the Chinese government recently launched a policy to save economic growth. This major turn in economic policy is like the sudden cancellation of the dynamic zero-COVID policy at the end of 2022. It is all due to the centralized approach of Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, which has delayed the introduction of effective policies. Liao Jinzhang, who returned to Taiwan 2 years ago, said Xi Jinping actually ordered the closure of the city at that time. The closure of Shanghai may be understandable, but he even shut down the Shanghai port, completely interrupting cargo imports. Xi Jinping has no regard for the economy. He only cares about whether his regime can be preserved. Li Mengju said that the 5 insurances and 1 fund, 5 insurances plus housing provident fund, policy implemented in 2015, including the increase in the minimum wage, led many traditional industries in Dongguan to move to Vietnam or other Southeast Asian countries. This was the first wave of exodus. The second wave included the U.S.-China trade war, the COVID-19, CCP virus, lockdowns, and the CCP's issuance of many inexplicable laws, such as the counter-espionage law and the patriotic education law, which made more and more Taiwanese businessmen feel that their personal safety was threatened, leading many to withdraw their factories. For the current situation, nearly 60% of Taiwanese businessmen are considering withdrawing from China. Huang Qinglong, chairman of the Taiwan Xinmin Cross-Strait Research Association, said there is a lesser-known reason. After 30 years of doing business on the mainland, Taiwanese businessmen face the issue of successors, whether the next generation is interested in taking over the industry. Huang Qinglong further mentioned that the most serious problem in the past 2 years is that local finances in mainland China are scarce. After 3 years of epidemics and the sluggish real estate market, local governments are now recovering fees, and even some tax rates and preferential conditions from the past 20 years have changed. This has made Taiwanese businessmen feel the huge changes in the entire investment environment, which has prompted them to want to leave early. Why are Taiwanese businessmen still silent about leaving China? Experts, intricate interests. The Epoch Times reporter found, while interviewing many Taiwanese businessmen, that even if they have evacuated China and returned to Taiwan, they still do not dare to talk about their experiences to the media. Huang Qinglong believes that a large part of the reason is that they still have intricate interests on the mainland. For example, they may still have the next generation there, and while the production line may have ended, the factory property rights are still being processed. Li Mengju also mentioned that after President Lai Ching-te came to power this year, the CCP immediately announced the 22 anti-Taiwan independence laws and others to contain Taiwanese businessmen. This has certainly caused Taiwanese businessmen to panic and avoid expressing any opinions publicly. Indeed, many Taiwanese businessmen decided to leave mainland China after the promulgation of these laws. Huang Qinglong said that he knows many Taiwanese businessmen who face such problems. Some have had to admit their losses and sell off assets midway, but even remitting the funds is still an issue. Some have even been threatened before returning to Taiwan. He believes these factors force them to keep a low profile and speak less.
In recent years, the Chinese economy has faced a wave of recession across all sectors, especially due to sharp fluctuations in the real estate market and the anti-impoverishment trend of the middle class. These economic phenomena not only affect the accumulation of personal wealth, but also profoundly change the social structure and the government's policy direction. Mingju Zheng, Professor Emeritus of the Department of Political Science at National Taiwan University, revealed the root causes of this series of problems through an in-depth analysis of China's current economic difficulties and offered important insights into their future political and social impact. He explored the nature of China's economic problems and their impact on future development from four main aspects: the real estate market crisis, the shift in economic policies, the influence of the external environment, and social unrest and political implications. Ray Dalio, founder of Bridgewater Fund, pointed out 7 major concerns when analyzing the Chinese economy. Real estate market crisis. China's real estate market is experiencing falling prices and overdevelopment, putting family wealth that relies heavily on real estate at huge risk. Government fiscal dilemma. Local government finances rely on land transfer fees and real estate income. The sluggish real estate market has exacerbated local fiscal pressures. Changes in the concept of getting rich is glorious. Deng Xiaoping's concept of getting rich is glorious has gradually weakened and been replaced by the common prosperity policy, which has suppressed market vitality. Unstable property rights protection. Insufficient protection of property rights has made entrepreneurs and investors lack confidence in the future economic environment, resulting in a decline in their willingness to invest. Dilemma of technological innovation. Although China has outstanding performance in the number of patents, it struggles to market innovative results, and excessive government intervention has limited the economic benefits of technological innovation. Long-term stagnation risk. China's current economic predicament is similar to the lost 30 years that followed the bursting of the Japanese economic bubble in the 1990s, facing the risk of long-term stagnation. Unclear prospects for foreign investment. While investing in China still yields returns, investors need to be more cautious. Foreign investment confidence in the Chinese market has begun to decline, necessitating an appropriate adjustment in the investment ratio. Real estate market crisis and the anti-impoverishment of the middle class. Mingju Zheng stated in the YouTube program Political and Economic Frontline that China's real estate market was once the engine of economic growth, but its decline in recent years has put many investors and the middle class in jeopardy. Real estate prices rose sharply for a time, causing many families to invest most of their wealth in real estate. However, as the real estate bubble burst, housing prices began to fall, prompting many local governments to introduce policies restricting the sale of real estate. Owners cannot mitigate losses by selling properties and still need to continue repaying their loans. This restriction on sales may stabilize the market in the short term, but in the long run, it greatly suppresses the normal operation of the market and distorts the supply-demand relationship. The middle class is the primary force in the consumer market, and their financial pressure directly affects the consumption capacity of the entire economy. When housing prices fall, assets shrink, and wages decline, or even unemployment occurs, many middle-class individuals are compelled to cut back on their daily expenses. Mingju Zheng pointed out that if this phenomenon continues to develop, it will lead to widespread impoverishment of the middle class and a regression of social classes. The middle class, originally a stabilizing factor in the economy, will see increased social contradictions and dissatisfaction as their wealth diminishes significantly and their quality of life declines sharply. The financial difficulties of local governments have further exacerbated the crisis in the real estate market. Previously, local governments relied on land transfer fees as a primary source of fiscal revenue. However, with the sluggish real estate market, land sales have become more challenging, leading to a significant drop in local fiscal revenue. This not only affects the daily operations of local governments, but also limits their capacity to promote economic development. To maintain fiscal revenue, local governments often choose to further develop real estate projects, creating a vicious cycle. Additionally, the problem of excessive infrastructure construction has come to the forefront. In recent years, China has built a large number of high-speed railways, airports, and other infrastructure. While this has temporarily boosted GDP, many projects have not yielded actual economic benefits, resulting in a plethora of idle mosquito stations. This overinvestment and ineffective construction have burdened local governments with heavy debts, further exacerbating their fiscal dilemmas.